Welcome back to MMA Al Dente. I am the guy whose dick has never failed him, not even once. And the fact that you would even suggest that out of the fucking clear blue shows that it's you who has the problem. And maybe it's you who ought to be taking pills for your problem. Anyway, I am here to talk about UFC 312, DDP versus Strickland 2. Okay, opening up UFC 312, we have Hyun Sung Park versus Naim Jargal Tumendermberel. That's right, Naim Jargal Tumendermberel. What? My prediction for this fight is Hyun Sung Park wins, and I'm going to go with him winning by decision. And I have no faith in any of this shit. I definitely give him a slight edge, but even if I'm right about him winning the fight, there's no trusting the decision part because the guy's got 9 victories, 8 of which are finishes. And he's shown since he's leveled up and hit the UFC that he can get these finishes down the stretch with a round 2 and a round 3 finish so far in the UFC. And I love to see that. And it's part of the reason why I do give him the edge. But still, I'll go with decision because the one guy who's lost between the two of them is Tumendermberel, and his loss comes to Carlos Hernandez by split decision. And I think Hernandez is the best fighter on either guy's resume. Tumendermberel, that was a loss by split decision. I did think he lost that fight, but the only reason he probably won on a judge's scorecard is because he's got some deceptive power. And he was able to land, even on pure exhaustion in round 3, he landed the best shot on Carlos Hernandez, and I'm assuming that's what it was, although I didn't look at the scorecards. Maybe he gave him fucking round 2 or whatever. But in general, Hernandez got the better of him. I thought Tumendermberel, in addition to landing these big moments, was doing a good job not letting Carlos Hernandez totally overwhelm him on the ground. He definitely got the better of him, but he stopped him from advancing a lot and from totally overwhelming him. And that's the best guy he's fought so far. So definitely gives me some confidence in his survivability and overall MMA durability. But yeah, he's got deceptive power, Tumendermberel. I may as well talk about that first. First of all, his nickname is Art of Knockout. And the guy that I'm picking to beat him is nicknamed Peace of Mind. So I'm a jerk off. But yeah, Art of Knockout. He showed it in the Carlos Hernandez fight. Maybe not the knockout, but the Art of Knockdown or whatever. In this other fight on the road to UFC, he won a split decision in a fight that you could certainly argue he lost due to control time again. But his power was there for him and gave him some nice moments. And his 2 actual knockout finishes in his MMA career both take place in under 30 seconds, which is certainly a testament to power. So yeah, for a guy with only 2 finishes on his record so far by knockout, I think he's got some deceptive power. And I bring this up to say that Hyun Sung Park, he's got no obvious definitive weakness yet, but he has been dropped in 2 fights. I don't think he was too badly hurt either time. I've revisited these fights. I watched them both this week. But these fights didn't go to the scorecards. He was able to come back and finish both guys by submission. But if they did go to the scorecards, that shit can add up. So he's got to keep his balance and keep his feet planted. But still, it's not all about being off balance and whatever. Sometimes it's just having that touch. And Tumendermberel, he might have that touch. He's got 2 fewer knockouts than Hyun Sung Park does. But he's definitely a tricky, dangerous guy, I think. But his biggest weakness, Tumendermberel, would have to be from Carlos Hernandez and from the other fight that I mentioned, the split decision, which, by the way, the split decision I'm talking about that he won on the road to UFC over a guy, Kawanata, whatever his name is, and he's got a nickname with a K or something. That's the guy that dropped Hyun Sung Park and then got submitted a minute later. So just know that, I guess. I don't know. But yeah, in that fight as well, he was crowded. The fight really could have gone either way. The guy secured a lot of control time, and in general, it was in the second half of the fight. Right away, Hyung Sung Park Tumendermberel got on top of him. But still, I look to that and say, if I have to look to a potential weakness with Tumendermberel moving forward, it would be that. But yeah, and on the flip side, like I mentioned, Hyung Sung Park's been dropped twice. But still, I've got to go with Park here. Each guy might have weaknesses moving forward and the rest of it. But Hyung Sung Park, he's never been beaten. There's no definitive weakness of his. I thought his chin, just despite being dropped both times against Senguk Choi and the guy that I mentioned, he was never really hurt either time. Came back to submit that one guy a minute later. And Senguk Choi, I think he dropped him in round 2 in the UFC, but he had his leg and whatever. He was off balance and yada, yada. Point of it is he came back, reclaimed control of that round, and then strangled him the next round anyway. So he's got some great traits so far going for him, Hyung Sung Park, and nothing really to look to as a weakness. And I do think in general, as far as the small moments go, without anybody getting dropped with a weird angle punch and whatever, Hyung Sung Park is the cleaner guy. He's the cleaner technician, and I also trust that he's better on the ground. Both guys, the majority of their finishes, or at least half of them for Park, are on the ground and mostly rear naked chokes. They're both well-rounded guys, and they can close the show, at least on lower levels of opposition. But again, Park has shown he's been able to do it so far in the UFC down the stretch, and I think he'd be more likely to win that wrestling battle anyway and get the better positions throughout the course of the fight. So in general, I think Park wins. I think he's got the better chance of getting the finish and the better chance of getting the decision. And I'm picking him to win by decision. But again, with not a lot of confidence, I see the odds. They're tight enough where if I felt strongly, I'd be betting on him, and I'm not going to bet on him. And my only real play here is resisting the urge to bet on Naim Jargal Tumendermberel. And I don't know how I'll do with that because there's still another fucking 5 days to go. But yeah, the pick is Park wins and by decision somehow. Next up, we have Quillen Salkilld versus Anshul Jubli, where I'm picking this guy, but I'm betting on this guy because I'm a dumbass. And he's a plus 410 underdog. That helps. But yeah, look, my prediction, I'll go with Quillen Salkilld winning, and I'll take him winning by decision. But I'm not too confident in that method of victory anyway. It's not like I'd be able to shave down his money line and find some path to victory with a prop. I really couldn't tell you how he's most likely to win if he should win. And on the flip side with Anshul Jubli, I can tell you that, well, yeah, I'll take a look at the props and see if something jumps out, but I don't need to do that. His money line is enticing enough at plus 410. And it's not a bet on Anshul Jubli, really, because he's got the same record exactly as Quillen Salkilld. It's not like he's got a wealth of experience to exploit Quillen Salkilld and drag him into deep waters or whatever. No, it's just a bet against Quillen Salkilld. And not on anything definitive either. Just on speculation. The guy's got a 7-1 record, and he's making his UFC debut. He shouldn't be minus 550 against anybody. The thing is, he's got one loss. It's in his pro debut, so it's kind of forgivable in that sense. Although it was a round 2 rear naked choke. I haven't seen it. Just know that I know that. And, I tried to see it. But since then, 7 straight victories. He's won every which way. Some nice knockouts, some good submissions, and even a 5-round decision victory a year or two ago. So not a whole lot of doubt going against Quillen Salkilld. And on the flip side, of course, Anshul Jubli, he's got a 7-1 record, and his one loss comes in his most recent fight. He was knocked out by Mike Breeden. And it was a bad loss. I mean, altogether, it's not like he just got the shit kicked out of him. He looked solid in the beginning of that fight. He looked really good. But then he collapsed in round 3. Mike Breeden, who had his back against the wall, I think would have been cut for sure with a loss there. He just charged after him, got in his face, talked shit to him for however many minutes straight. I know it wasn't 5 because in the end he knocked him out in round 3. And that's the thing too. You could attribute the loss to cardio because certainly that played a role, but something's got to be said about his chin because despite the cardio and whatever else, he got clipped and knocked out in the end. And that's something that could haunt him moving forward. And as opposed to cardio, that might be a hole that you can't patch. So I don't know what kind of shape Jubli is in moving forward, and it wouldn't surprise me if the majority of his losses are knockouts moving forward, even though I picked him to lose by decision or whatever. But I know technically he's got shit to offer everywhere. He's really solid on the ground. I think both guys want to get on top and be on top of you. And Jubli showed against Jacob Saragui what he can do on top. He can be a big problem. And on the feet, even though there could be some vulnerabilities there, but he's definitely sharp, Jubli. He's got some sharp, tight strikes. He's pretty fast. And again, we're talking about 2 guys with 7-1 records. So if there's a chin to be cracked for Quillen Salkilld or anything like that, we haven't seen it yet. But it doesn't mean that he doesn't have weaknesses. So it's all speculative. I do think Quillen should get the better of Anshul Jubli, and I do think he'd be the most likely guy to get the knockout. I'd favor him to get the submission as well. The guy's good at snatching up some guillotines and whatever, but he's good at getting on top of you, and I think he'd be more likely to win that battle as well. And of course, like I said, I've seen him go 5 rounds, and even though I haven't seen his one loss where he got submitted in round 2, I don't have any doubts, any visible doubts in his cardio or chin or whatever. So yeah, I give him the edge, but on principle, I am betting on Anshul Jubli because I am principally a dumbass. Next up, we have Kevin Jousset versus Jonathan Micallef. My prediction for this fight is Kevin Jousset wins, and I've got him winning by decision. I think Jonathan Micallef has some potential advantages in this fight. I think he is the faster guy on the outside, the more agile fighter. And I also think he's probably the better submission artist. But Kevin Jousset on the feet, I think he is faster than I gave him credit for when he first came to the UFC. I was quick to dismiss him as a zombie. But I like the way he looked in that Song Kanon fight. And I like the way he kept that pace and even built that pace over the course of 3 rounds. That was a great look. And on the ground, even though I do think he's the lesser submission artist, I do think he is underrated overall on the ground. And I also think generally he wins that whole physicality, control time wrestling battle in this matchup, being the bigger man, the taller man anyway. And I think with a little leverage on his side, I think he makes it difficult for Micallef to take him down and generally keeps himself safe from that potentially more dangerous submission game of Jonathan Micallef. Jousset, I've always thought is a little underrated on the ground. I don't want to say I called his first submission over Kiefer Crosby, that's his only submission, the round 1 finish in his UFC debut. But I thought, yeah, this guy likes to get in and crowd fighters and get on top of them. This guy, he doesn't have a lot of submission victories, but he's more of a grappler than his record would indicate. Still, though, in this fight, I do envision most of it being on the feet. And I do think Jonathan Micallef will be the faster guy, certainly at first. But I don't think he's got the striking of Brian Battle to go through Kevin Jousset. And I do think Jousset would start to catch up to him, where he was never really able to do that with Battle. And of course, Battle slowed down Kevin Jousset by clinching up with him for a round and wearing him down. And then still was able to put his foot on the gas at the end of round 2 and force a finish. But still, Jonathan Micallef, even though he kind of reminds me of Brian Battle, to be honest, and he is good at fighting long, and he's got some great high kicks, some nice head kick finishes like Brian Battle. It's a great long-range weapon. I still don't think he can make his advantages work for him like Brian Battle did. I think Kevin Jousset would be the one slowing Micallef down. Let me address their losses here. Jonathan Micallef's only got one loss, and it's to Alden Bates, who is actually one of the guys to beat Jack Della Maddalena in one of his first two fights. And then Jack avenged the loss. But still, that guy got him out of there in round 4. Jonathan Micallef was tired. He was hurt. He was very competitive, but he had slowed down, which means his hands came down, and he got clipped because Alden Bates has the physicality of Yoel Romero. So it was a bad spot for him being tired like that in round 4 against that guy, but that's what happened, and he ended up getting knocked out. And that was at the beginning of last year. I'm not ready to write off his chin or even his skill set because that's a very forgivable loss. That guy hasn't been to the UFC, but he's obviously a very good fighter. But that is still his only loss. And for Kevin Jousset now, he's got 3 losses. I used to say he was never legitimately finished, but now he's been legitimately finished in his last fight against Brian Battle, who people actually thought was going to go lose to a French dude in Paris. Whatever. But Brian Battle was in his face and slowed him down, and then had that striking in round 2 where his hands were on fire, and Kevin Jousset just got clipped one too many times, started staggering, and got taken out. It was a legitimate finish, even though he didn't go unconscious or anything. I'm sure it took something from his overall health as a fighter. But it's been long enough now, few months, for a guy who wasn't knocked unconscious, where I think he's coming back healthy. His other losses are to this guy, Caleb Rideout, who was able to outstrike him from the outside and win with mobility and agility and the rest of it. It was still a close fight in the end and a 5-rounder, but that was a split decision loss that he lost because of his style. He's a little more slower and plodding than he needs to be sometimes. And his first loss was to Jack Della Maddalena, like I mentioned. It was a doctor stoppage, so it's not a legitimate finish. But Jack still had him hurt and definitely was in the realm of finishing him, no doubt. But regardless, even if he did, it's a forgivable loss because it happened in his 3rd fight, and it's against a guy who's probably fighting for a world title with a victory in his next fight. Although I feel like I've said that for his past 3 fights. And Kevin Jousset. Oh, Jonathan Micallef's got some good victories too. I've seen some of them, not all of them because they're not all available. But he's gotten some good victories every which way. Like I said, he's got some head kick knockouts, but he's got some finishes of other sorts down the stretch. 3rd round TKO in his 2nd fight, an arm triangle choke in round 0. Whatever. And I think I even saw that one too. And he's got 2 decision victories over solid fighters, solid regional Aussie fighters, or somewhere over there. I guess that's what regional means. But yeah, 2 solid decision victories for Jonathan Micallef, which is a good look. And I was able to see only one of them. But still, yeah, he's got a good look to him, and he looks promising. But I do think Kevin Jousset is sharp enough where he'll be able to start intercepting him and slowing down that agile fighter and even pinning him and slowing him down that way. But eventually slowing him down and kind of taking over and outgrinding him down the stretch. That is the prediction. Jousset by decision. Next up, we have Cody Steele versus Rongzhu, otherwise known as Zhu Rong. My prediction for this fight is Zhu Rong wins, and I've got him winning by knockout. I think Cody Steele is a really talented guy, and I think regardless of what happens here, he's got a future in the UFC. But I've got to pick Zhu Rong to win this fight because even though Cody Steele is incredibly talented on the ground, I think he's trending more towards being a standing fighter as an MMA fighter, and there's no real reason to doubt him there. He's really got it going on the feet. Guy's really talented, dangerous, and he's been winning down the stretch with finishes over better opposition in his 7 fights. But this is still a big step up in Zhu Rong. And Zhu Rong First of all, has an incredible chin. This guy's never been knocked out, and he's got a ton of experience. The one guy that TKO him was Chris Padilla in his last fight, and if you remember, he got split open. So that was a doctor stoppage. That doesn't count, unless, of course, there's another doctor stoppage due to a cut. But he's incredibly durable. He's incredibly dangerous. He's got 15 knockouts in his 25 wins, which may not be the best percentage there or whatever, but it's solid. And of course, he's got a wealth of MMA experience with over 30 fights at 24 years old. So he shed all the learning curve, nervous energy, butterfly horse shit. And I think Cody Steele still hasn't felt everything. The body shot going the wrong way and the leg kick and the drop foot and whatever the fuck else can go wrong. And I do think Zhu Rong can surprise him here with his danger, durability, and experience. I think for a guy in Cody Steele who I don't think is going to be able to go through him on the ground, even if he's going to try to in the first place, Zhu Rong does have 85% takedown defense. I do think Zhu Rong will be a live underdog here in this spot, and I've got him knocking out Cody Steele, who I have seen get a little sloppy and a little overzealous, leaving himself open to counters and just going for it. But again, it's all a big fucking learning curve. He's just getting going, and I'm sure he's improved a lot since his last fight. But yeah, I got to go with Zhu Rong here. And Zhu Rong, I have to mention, he's been submitted quite a few times, all way back when he was a teenager, a few times, and some against good fighters too. But the only time in the last 6, 7 years or whatever it is has been in the UFC against Ignacio Bahamondes. We got him out of there with a round 3 Darce. That guy's an incredible fighter, obviously, and he's in his prime, so there's no shame in losing that fight. And of course, he's battled his way back into the UFC. But yeah, that's the last time he's been submitted. But I have to mention this one fight he had, Zhu Rong, against this guy, Marcio Andrade, where he's the only guy to ever submit that guy, and he did it in round 5 after fighting off Darce chokes in round 4 and round 3 when he was exhausted and the fight wasn't going his way. So it's not like, even if you get Zhu Rong exhausted, you got him down there. He's not a fish out of water. He's got plenty of submissions himself, and that one being the best for sure. But yeah, I think this one isn't about who's got the better submission skills, because I'd pick Cody Steele there. I think Zhu Rong's takedown defense keeps this fight from being solved in that realm. And on the feet, even though Cody Steele has a lot to offer, and he's been winning down the stretch and showing he keeps that power deep into the fight, he's still a 7-0 guy, and I'm taking the guy with 15 knockouts and durability, bona fide durability on his side. Because again, he's lost 6 fights or whatever, and he hasn't been knocked out. So I think Rongzhu, despite maybe not having the complete skill set and perhaps the future of Cody Steele, I think he's going to be too much for him right now, and I'm hoping to cash in on Rongzhu. Next up, we have Alexander Topuria, brother of Ilya, taking on Colby Thicknesse, training partner of Alexander Volkanovski. My prediction for this fight is Alexander Topuria wins, and I'll go with him winning by knockout. But I doubt I'm even going to attempt to bet on that because he's such a big favorite. However, I've already bet on Colby Thicknesse, and I'll wait to see what his props look like if I can waste more money. But I don't even know if I'd go chasing props because I couldn't tell you how it would look if he won this fight. I can tell you how the one loss between the two of them as a professional looked, and that was Alexander Topuria's loss back in 2015. So you can fucking dismiss it on those grounds. But yeah, it was 2015, almost 10 years ago. He was 19 years old, I believe, maybe 20. And he was doing really well, looked like the much sharper fighter, but his technical advantages couldn't keep up with this guy's physicality. He was fighting a guy who had the strength of Alir Latifi, if you remember him. And when he couldn't put the guy away and his takedown started failing him in the end, he gassed out and got pounded out, actually kind of shooting a half-ass takedown. He just got pinned and the ref was forced to stop it because he was eating too many shots. So it was a cardio collapse, no other way around it. but it was 10 years ago, and he did step away from the sport for 6 years after that, 6.5 years, until he made his return. So it's safe to say his brother probably inspired him between then. But also, it's pretty much safe to say it's like a new career and a new fighter since 2021 when he made his return. And since then, he's gotten 3 victories, 3 finishes, all TKOs, even though one is listed as a submission to punches, which historically on Sherdog would mean it was a submission victory, but whatever. That's beside the point. But yeah, the guy, he's looked incredible and he looks really sharp, just like his brother. I don't know if he's just like his brother, but at least for a few minutes he is. And he's certainly got that factor too, that danger. He's knocked some guys dead, and I think he's very dangerous for anybody in the world when he's firing on all cylinders. The big question is, what's he going to look like in a competitive fight that goes down the stretch? And I don't know. He's never been in that spot aside from that one fight 10 years ago, and it didn't go his way. I'm sure he's thought about that fight a lot since, and even though he hasn't been able to prove it inside the cage, he's been waiting, knowing that opportunity is going to come, and he's going to have to pass that test, and I'm hoping to see it here. Not that I'm even hoping he passes the test. I don't give a fuck. In fact, I'm hoping he fails, so maybe I'll win $7 on Colby Thicknesse. But I do want to see, I do want to learn more about him as a fighter. He's obviously got a lot of talent and some high hopes. I don't know if he's going to be winning championships, but he's a fucking Topuria, and he better start fucking acting like it. I don't know. But yeah, I've got to go with him to win this fight because you could see on the feet, I could see, I just try to look at each guy whenever I'm breaking down a fight and imagine what they're going to look like in there with each other. And Topuria is the sharper guy, the faster guy. He's cocked and ready, keeps himself safe defensively while he's fresh anyway in round 1. And he's certainly got firepower to go through anybody with any sort of fragility, which is what he's done every other fucking time aside from that loss. Colby Thicknesse. He's got a record of 7-0 and the greatest fucking name ever. And he's also 8-1, or no, 7-1 as an amateur, which is also a great look. Wasn't able to see that one loss. But his 7 fights as a pro, he's won every which way. He's gotten TKOs. He's gotten submissions, at least 2 of them anyway, both rear naked chokes. And he's also won a few fights by decision. He hasn't beaten anybody too great. I'd say the best guy he fought was his second fight against this guy, Kakembo. That guy doesn't have a pretty record, but he's tough, never been finished, and he's been in there with some good fighters. And that guy, Kakembo, did give him trouble early on. He caught him with a front kick right in the face and dropped him. It was very forgivable because it was picture perfect, like fucking Anderson Silva. And I can say, it's a half strike against his chin or whatever, but he survived and he battled back. He had a really rough first round in that fight, and he scratched and clawed for a victory. Unless I'm thinking of the wrong fight with the wrong fighter. I don't know. I watch like 24 fights before I make these videos every week. But anyway, I do think that was his toughest test. Certainly the best fighter he's beaten. And to do that in his second fight and weather a storm like that, if I do have the right fight, was a good look. Showed some grit, which is not something he's needed to show. He steamrolled a lot of his opposition. Every finish he's had has been in round 1, just like Topuria. But having those 3 decision victories, and especially that first decision victory that he had in his second fight there against the guy Kakembo, I think it gives me a little confidence to actually place a bet on Colby Thicknesse. And again, it's a bet on him imposing his will and slowing down Alexander Topuria, because I think he's up against it speed-wise and power-wise early. But it's still a hope and a prayer. It's not like he's guaranteed to outlast Topuria. Topuria failed in his one fight that went past round 1, but he's still obviously training with incredible fighters, and I'm sure he's been thinking about that loss for 10 years and ready to overcome that hurdle. So Yeah, I'll go with Topuria winning. I'll go with his sharp striking carrying him to a victory. And I'll go with it happening early, him stopping Colby Thicknesse in round one. But I'm hoping to see more from Topuria, even in victory. I want to see that round three finish or him weathering a storm or whatever, just to learn about him as a fighter. And really, what I'm hoping to see is Colby Thicknesse winning. So again, I can profit with fucking $7. Big time. Next up, we have Wang versus Bruna Brazil in another one of these. Yeah, I'll pick Wang to win. I'll go with her winning by decision. But I'm not going to even chase any props with her. She's too big of a favorite, and I've already bet on Bruna Brazil. And likewise, I won't chase any props on her side because I want to cover every path to victory, especially with the way things looked for Wang at the end of her last fight. I do think Wang wins. If you put a gun to my head with no bets in front of me, no money line or anything, I'd say, yeah, I'll go with Wang. I think she wins. I think she's the sharper striker. I think she's the more deadly striker as well and wins the first knockout. And I also think she's not a girl that can just be bulldozed over and taken down very easily, especially because Bruna Brazil is moving up in weight for this fight. She's moving up from strawweight to flyweight. I don't always mention that, by the way, but just know that I know that. Sometimes I'll break down a fight and then I'll be done. I'll go, you didn't mention this asshole is moving up to welterweight? Fuck it. I'll do it next time. But yeah, she is moving up to flyweight here. And certainly that means she's going to be up against it, I think, physically. But I still think she's an excellent takedown artist, Bruna Brazil. She's got some really good takedowns. She's gotten nice submissions when she's needed to. Got a beautiful guillotine in round three over Alexia Tainara. And that victory alone would be enough for me to bet on her, to be honest. But also, she's shown she can get knockouts as well. That nice knockout over Marnik Man in round two with the head kick. Although that's Marnik Man, so make of that what you will. But look, Wang in her last fight against Gabriela Fernandez, she got knocked down and then submitted. The ball got rolling with her chin failing her. She got clipped with a shot and got knocked down, and then Gabriela pounced on her and put her away. And I believe she had to put her away because Wang didn't tap, which is a good look for her toughness and whatever. But yeah, Bruna Brazil, she may not have the squeeze of Gabriela Fernandez, but she's a well-rounded fighter, certainly, compared to Wang And again, I think she's an above-average takedown artist. And with a few ways to find success and to win this fight, it's absolutely worth a bet for me on Bruna Brazil. But yeah, Bruna, she's been knocked out, and Wang is the sharper striker and the more deadly striker. And a knockout for her wouldn't completely surprise me. But the prediction is that she's able to thwart Bruna Brazil, maybe not with the most volume, but just with the right strikes at the right time. And she's able to also maybe not bully her physically, but stop herself from being bullied. And she wins the fight by decision. Again, gun to my head, that's what I'd go with. Remove the gun, and I'm betting on Bruna Brazil. Already have. Next up, we have Tom Nolan versus Vyacheslav Borshchev, otherwise known as SlavaClaus. My prediction for this fight is SlavaClaus wins, and I've got him winning by TKO in round two. I am a little more worried about Slava these days with him being hurt in some recent fights. Against Chase Hooper, he got dropped. And against Nazim Sadikov, he got dropped. And that was one where he was hurt very badly and came close to getting finished with strikes. But in both cases, he was able to survive and survive some very bad spots and live the fight another day. Actually, in the Chase Hooper fight, he was finished in round two with a Darce choke, but he still really impressed me on the ground against Chase. First of all, he wasn't legitimately finished. He didn't tap, although I think there could have been a technical submission coming. But he did not quit, and he was still fighting really hard with a guy that had him outgunned in a big way in that fight. And I bring that up to say if he finds himself in a bad spot with Tom Nolan, I don't think Tom Nolan's going to be able to close a show like a Chase Hooper could. And I would think Slava would be able to fight his way out of bad spots. The one major weakness I see for SlavaClaus here is getting knocked out in round one. And again, he's been clipped, but he's never been finished. So I think Tom Nolan will bring that round one storm. And whether it's in the form of a knockdown, a takedown, and a submission attempt, or whatever he's going to bring, I think he's going to bring that storm in round one. But I don't think he's going to be able to consistently out wrestle SlavaClaus like the guys that have beaten him. Slava's a guy you got to take down repeatedly. Again, the one person to finish him was Chase Hooper, but everyone else beat him by decision. And Tom Nolan, even though he's won some decisions, I don't trust him as an offensive wrestler at the UFC level. He's got one loss as an amateur where he got TKO'd in round three, which is a 9-minute fight. So after 6 minutes, he was fatigued. He was shooting some desperate takedowns, and he ended up getting met halfway and clipped and taken out of the fight. And I do think he learned from that. He actually had a good few battles in his some decision victories in his first few pro fights, especially his first one, I think, against the guy Sam Flint. And he looked like a workhorse there and hitting takedowns down the stretch and the rest of it. But I still I don't trust him to fight like that against anybody in the UFC. And I think Slava on the feet will be able to make him pay when he gets tired like few others can. Slava's got that excellent combination striking. And of course, I got to emphasize the body shots, which only make you exponentially more tired. But yes, Slava knows how to pick his shots. He's got a nice long body to work with here. And I do think once this fight gets out of round one, I see him taking over on the feet completely. If he doesn't do that in round one anyway. Tom Nolan, it'd be nice to see him win in some other way other than a round one destruction. I know he beat Alex Reyes by decision in the last one, but here I think he'll be the one who's got to force the wrestling to prolong this fight and win with a decision. And I don't trust him to have that in him yet. I think SlavaClaus might face some dicey moments, but he's going to be able to weather them and take over and put him away. Tom Nolan, I have to mention, is one pro loss. It's another TKO, but it's the Nicholas Mota who knocked him out. Nicholas Mota is an incredibly dangerous guy, despite being pretty vulnerable himself. But yeah, he's dangerous, and he was able to go through Tom, cracking his chin very early in that fight. Just pretty much steamrolled him. And that was a major upset. I'm not saying Tom Nolan has a weak chin or anything, but I'm saying it happened once, it can happen again, and that's always a factor as well. But I've got this being less about the chin and more about the striking of SlavaClaus and the superior striking carrying him to a victory. So yeah, SlavaClaus by round 2 TKO is the pick. SlavaClaus is the bet, and this is one where, I'll look for some props. Next up, we have Gabriel Santos versus Jack Jenkins. My prediction for this one is Santos wins, and I've got him winning by decision. And the basis for the prediction is that I thought he beat Lerone Murphy. And that should be enough. But at the same time, I thought Jack Jenkins lost to Jamal Emmers. So there's also that. But look, Santos, he's got an 11-2 record. He's got a 1-2 UFC record. He's just got that win over Jia Yi or Yi Jia. Before that, he had 2 consecutive losses to begin his UFC career. But they were against really good fighters. He got knocked out against David Onama in a fight where he was doing really well early. And he lost a tight split decision to Lerone Murphy, who was near the top of the division. And that's a fight that, again, I think he should have won. But just showing that he can hang with these guys and take them down. I do think he'll have that same speed and those same advantages over Jack Jenkins. Gabriel Santos is a really well-rounded fighter, and he's no stranger to fighting long fights. And I think he'll be comfortable here, being able to secure top position and generally outwork Jack Jenkins. And on the feet, I think he's sharper and moves better and will keep himself from falling into that leg kicking trap of Jack. And I just think Santos wins by points at the end of this one. Uh, Jack Jenkins, he's got a record of 13-3. His three losses include one by TKO and two by submission. He was submitted way back when, 6-7 years ago, in two consecutive fights, and he avenged one of them, by the way, a few years later. But in the last 7 years or whatever, his one loss was an arm injury to Chepe Mariscal. I'm not saying he wouldn't have lost that fight anyway, but that's no guarantee, and it's not a real loss. Of course, the Jamal Emmers fight probably should be, in my opinion. Again, I thought Jamal Emmers won that fight by decision and did so with a good amount of top control as well. But that one went Jack's way, and it's not like it was a robbery. Jack scratched and clawed to give himself a shot at winning that one. But yeah, I've got Santos winning. I do think if there's something still there, Santos could potentially go through him on the ground. And on the feet, I don't think Jack Jenkins has that David Onama power to turn the fight on a dime. I think he's more of a break you down, chop you down kind of guy. And he'd love to get on top of you and smash your face with elbows too, Jack Jenkins. I think on top of Gabriel Santos, I wouldn't expect Gabriel to submit him despite the submission losses, especially from the guard. And I think Jack would be able to control him and maybe even damage him more than Gabriel could on top of him. But I do think Gabriel is more likely to win the wrestling battle and find top position in the first place. So overall, I give an edge to Gabriel Santos. He's looked so good in the UFC for a guy who's 1-2. But I can't ignore how he's looked in some of these losses here, and I definitely trust him more to win this fight. So Gabriel Santos is the pick. I've got him winning by decision, and this is one where I don't think I'm going to bet on it, but we'll see. Maybe a plus point situation for Jack. Next up, we have Francisco Prado versus Jake Matthews. My prediction for this fight is Jake Matthews wins, and I've got him winning by decision. I think Jake Matthews is going to turn up the wrestling here, and that's going to be the difference for him in this fight. Francisco Prado is a young kid, still only 22 years old, which is fucking insane. He's got two losses, but they're both in the UFC. To Jamie Malarkey a few years ago by decision, and to Daniel Zellhuber by decision. Jamie Malarkey was able to mix in the wrestling and score some points there, and Daniel Zellhuber didn't need to. Prado still gave him one hell of a fight. Daniel Zellhuber is a problem on the feet, and Prado gave him problems early. And then down the stretch, he wasn't able to keep up with Zellhuber, and Zellhuber walked away with a 29-28 decision. Of course, between those fights, he knocked out Atman Azaitar, getting his sixth knockout in 12 victories. He's definitely got some danger there, but I have to say a lot of his knockouts, including that one, are over guys with some durability issues. But even if they weren't, I don't think it would matter. I trusted Jake Matthews' chin standing up against Michael Morales last year, or whenever that fight was, and I certainly trusted against Francisco Prado. Jake still himself is only 30 years old. He's still a kid, and he's the Celtic kid. And yeah, I trust his chin and I trust his skills. They're all at their peak, and his submission defense as well. The last guy to submit him was Sean Brady in round 3 4 years ago. But yeah, he's been submitted a few times over the years, and the one guy to legitimately TKO him was Kevin Lee, and that was on the ground from the back mount. It's another jiu-jitsu loss. But I think Jake is safe from Prado down there, certainly, and I think Jake will be the one taken to the ground and giving Prado something to worry about on his back. And look, on the feet, Jake Matthews, he's a very comfortable, confident striker. He's fast, he's sharp, he's not too powerful, but he's great technically, and that's part of the reason why he's never been knocked out. He keeps himself safe. I don't know if Prado would be putting up better numbers and getting in his face. Prado, there's a chance would win the points battle on the feet, just taking it to Jake. But I think Jake would certainly keep himself safe there, and probably give Prado a lot to worry about as well. And on the ground, I do think Jake is the guy that would be taking the fight there and give him more to worry about on the ground as well. Jake, despite the jiu-jitsu losses or whatever I just said, he's got some jiu-jitsu wins as well. The guy's very skilled down there. He's really fucking strong too, even since he's moved up to welterweight. And I think he'll be too much for Francisco Prado. So Jake Matthews by decision is the pick, and haven't bet on it yet. Next up, we have Jimmy Crute versus Rodolfo Bellato. My prediction for this fight is it ends in a finish. That's the prediction. I will go with Jimmy Crute because he got a gun to my head. I guess I'll pick Jimmy Crute. And the basis for the prediction is he's the underdog. So yeah, I'll go with Jimmy Crute winning by knockout. But look, in general, I don't have a strong lean one way or the other as far as my betting play goes. But I can tell you I have doubt in both guys enough to the point where I'm waiting to see the under. The under and potentially the finishing props. Jimmy Crute, I think, would be the more likely guy to get the knockout. Both guys are physical and definitely have knockout power. But Bellato's the guy that I have more doubt in his chin. Bellato was knocked out twice. Of course, they're to Vitor Petrino, so it's forgivable because that guy's a fucking monster. But he's also been hurt badly in his last two fights. Against Ihor Potieria, they gave us one of the best fights of the year. But Ihor Potieria had him hurt, and even the Murtazala guy, he fought on the Contender Series in the fight before that. And it's not like he's got too many fights to look to. So in general, I have doubts about Rodolfo Bellato's chin, and it may not happen here, but I do think the majority of his future losses are going to be by knockout. Jimmy Crute, of course, his one knockout loss was to Jamal Hill. It's a little forgivable because he's near the top of the sport. But yeah, there's a little bit of doubt with him as well. That was a bad one. He got knocked out in a minute. And in general, he's been roughed up with a lot of these recent losses where there's enough mileage on him to just give me doubt altogether. I've seen him in a lot of tough fights. But again, he's still only 28 years old, even with the 2-year layoff. So it's not like he's Jens Pulver in his mid-30s or something. But he was an old fighter, the first UFC lightweight champion, if you don't know. But then his chin failed him tremendously. Anyway, Jimmy Crute, though, he's the guy between the two of them who has been submitted twice. At the same time, he's the guy who submitted Paul Craig and Mikhail Oleksiejczuk. He's definitely a force on the ground, but he's the guy who's been tapped twice. He got submitted by Misha Serkinov with the Peruvian necktie or whatever the fuck it was. And he also got submitted by Alonzo Menefield with that guillotine in their rematch, which is also his last fight. I'm not saying he's an easy guy to submit. I'm saying it's happened twice. Both guys are skilled submission artists. So yeah, as far as potential props go, I'd give the first submission to Rodolfo Bellato. That's what I would do. And I would pick it to happen in the middle of a grueling fucking fight. But yeah, Jimmy Crute, if he gets on top, even if you've never been submitted and you're a really skilled black belt or whatever, Jimmy Crute can advance on you and rip your arm off. The guy is still an incredibly skilled grappler, and I'm sure he's been polishing it all up over the course of the last 2 years, prepping for this comeback. So yeah, I do think this will be a fun, wild fight. I'd be surprised if nobody got dropped, at the very least, if not knocked out. And my official prediction, that I have no faith in, is Jimmy Crute wins by knockout. He's dangerous and physical, and he makes good on what I think might be a weak chin of Rodolfo Bellato and gets the knockout. But if I'm wrong, it's a knockout or submission the other way and every which fucking way. I think this one ends in a finish. And again, if it doesn't, it's going to be a fucking war. Next up, we have Justin Tafa versus Taliesin Teixeira. My prediction for this fight is Justin Tafa wins, and I've got him winning by triangle choke in round 2. All right. I'll take him winning by knockout. Let's go with knockout. I'll take a risk. But yeah, look, the basis for the prediction is that Justin Tafa has fought longer than 2 minutes, and Taliesin Teixeira has not. And Taliesin Teixeira is a much better grappler. I know he's a black belt in jiu-jitsu, but I think he's going to have a hard time getting Tafa to the ground. And on the feet, even though Taliesin Teixeira is very fucking dangerous himself, he hasn't proven so at a UFC level. And Justin Tafa, on the flip side, has an incredible chin on him anyway. He's been knocked out once, and it was the Jorgen De Castro, who just got a nice bare knuckle victory this past weekend. But it happened once, sure, and I know it can happen again. These guys are fucking 300 pounds. But I still trust the chin of Justin Tafa. I think he gets Taliesin Teixeira out of round one into the deep waters, like round minute 6 of a fight. And I think he's still got that power, and it's too much for him. Justin Tafa's put a few guys away early in round 2, but generally speaking, every one of his wins, aside from those early victories, are in round 1. He's a round 1 finisher, and they're all by knockout. So I don't want to make it like this is the most reliable guy to get in your face and wear you down and be Merab Dvalishvili in round 3. That's not who Tafa is. But despite most of his experience in the later rounds coming in losses, he's still been there and done that. And Taliesin Teixeira has not. He's a 25-year-old who doesn't know what it's like in a competitive fight yet. He's steamrolled everybody, all 7 of his victories in one round, and almost all of them in the first half of the first round. He got 1 submission victory in his debut, a nice inverted armbar. And after that, all 6 victories are by knockout. He's definitely got the touch. He does have knockout power, and there's no real strikes going against him. It looked like he had a rough first minute on the Contender Series. But yeah, there's nothing really you can look to. It's just a bunch of questions about what he's going to look like if and when. And that's the basis for the prediction. If and when, I think Justin Tafa is the better man, and I still think he hits like a fucking mule, and I'm taking Tafa to knock him out. Justin Tafa, of course, has been beaten a few times because he's been in the UFC for some time now. He's got 4 losses, the first of which comes in his UFC debut. He was knocked out against Jorgen De Castro. And then after that, he lost decisions to Jared Vanderaa and Carlos Felipe before finally being out-wrestled, really, by Carl Williams. Carl Williams was the first guy to take him down and make that the story of the fight, really. And even in that fight, Justin Tafa gave him hell, clipped him, hurt him, and didn't stop. But yeah, it wasn't enough. So yeah, Justin Tafa, far from being a well-rounded fighter, he's pretty limited himself, and he's far from being the most proven 3-round fighter himself. But I'm taking him based on his experience, and with the power to back it up, I got him winning by knockout. That's the fucking prediction. And in the co-main event of the evening, we have Tatiana Suarez challenging Weili Zhang for her strawweight championship of the world. My prediction for this fight is Tatiana Suarez wins, and I've got her winning by submission. And obviously, it's not based on any weakness of Weili Zhang's. She's never been submitted. But it's based purely on the strengths of Tatiana Suarez. It's based on her offense. And her offense is pretty fucking good. She is a beast of a wrestler, and she's also a beast of a submission artist. She's very much like the female Khamzat Chimaev. Maybe not as dominant, of course, but she's definitely in that realm for the females, and I think she can present a unique challenge for Weili Zhang. If her wrestling is dominant, Tatiana Suarez, I think she can make Weili Zhang uncomfortable like she's never felt before. And I also think from a lot of different angles, that front headlock position and even little scrambles on the ground, Tatiana Suarez is incredibly dangerous with every choke. And if Weili Zhang gets caught, I don't think she's going to be able to fight her way out so easily like she did against Amanda Lemos, who laced up a nice Darce choke from the bottom on a few occasions against Weili Zhang. But yeah, Tatiana Suarez, especially with dominant position and top position, she's really good at setting up her chokes, and she's got great Darce, Really great guillotine, and probably a good anaconda as well. But yeah, I think Tatiana Suarez would catch her with that series of chokes, one of them one way or another. And that's my prediction. She wins the fight by being the dominant Tatiana Suarez that we've seen in the past. Tatiana, of course, has never been beaten. She's 10-0. I don't have to go through her whole history, but she's had a lot of layoffs for a lot of different reasons, a really tough road to the title. I'd say her toughest fight throughout her whole career was against Nina Nunes, who might have been Nina Ansaroff at the time she fought this fight. But regardless of what her name was, Nina was able to outlast Tatiana and take the fight to her in round 3, where Tatiana was no longer the dominant grappler. Of course, Tatiana did hurt her neck, which is supported by the fact that she was out for another 4 years after that fight. But she did hurt her neck, and she did push through those shitty circumstances to make it to the final bell, where she had banked enough success early in the first 2 rounds to walk away with a victory. So even though I thought she lost round 3, I'm not willing to say it was cardio or this or that or whatever. Having said that, if you would ask me what it looked like if Tatiana lost to Weili Zhang, I would say it would be her getting pieced up down the stretch, whether that's with successful grappling from Tatiana early or not. I do think Weili is sharper on the feet, and I do think she would be more sharper, much more sharp, down the stretch in round 4, let's say, where Tatiana Suarez has not been. But if Tatiana's uncomfortable in a few different ways, being forced to fight a long fight and forced to fight a fight where she's not being the dominant wrestler, I do think that fight is going to be running away from her. And I envision Weili Zhang winning. I'd say Weili would win a decision, but again, I've never seen Tatiana lose. So I don't know what it would look like when things aren't going her way. Weili Zhang, she's got 3 losses. She lost to Rose Namajunas in consecutive fights, both for the title. She got head kicked 4 years ago in a minute, which is one of the greatest victories ever. And then in the rematch, it was a razor-thin decision, but Rose ended up being the better woman down the stretch, hitting that clutch 5th-round takedown anyway, and winning that fight by split decision. That was really a good battle, and Weili looked really sharp for the first half, out-grappling Rose and out-striking her as well. And her first loss was in her first fight ever. She lost by decision to this fighter Mang Bo, or Bo Mang, who today has a 22-7 record. So you know she wasn't a bum. But yeah, Mang Bo beat her by decision, and then after that, Rose Namajunas twice. There's no shame in any of those losses, and I do think she's still in her prime now, Weili Zhang. She's been going 5 hard rounds in most of her fights, taking it to Amanda Lemos and Yan Xiaonan. But she got some finishes before that over Carla Esparza and Joanna Jędrzejczyk. Both girls kind of had one foot out the door, but still, you can't deny a spinning back fist. Weili Zhang is dangerous. So yeah, Weili Zhang doesn't have a lot going against her. You can look to these losses and try to find something there, but I don't think she's going to get knocked out by Tatiana. Tatiana doesn't have one strike that's as nifty as that lead head kick from Rose. And even though I'm sure she can be taken down and whatever from Tatiana, I don't think losing that 5th round is going to be the crux of the matter if she loses to Tatiana like it was with Rose. So I think for her to lose to Tatiana, like I'm predicting, it's going to be a brand new type of fight. One where she's facing a dominant wrestler that is too much for her physicality, because Weili Zhang is really fucking strong and physical. And I think Tatiana could prove to be a bad matchup for all that strength and physicality, and that is the prediction. So yeah, I don't know where the fuck I ended up here. I've been talking for a while. But Tatiana Suarez by submission is the prediction. I've already bet on her, and the odds are fluctuating. They're pretty much even. It's a toss-up right now. But I will look for the props. I'll look to play Tatiana by submission, because even though Weili's never been submitted, I would think if Tatiana is winning, it's got to be by submission. That would definitely be the primary path to victory anyway. And on the flip side for Weili Zhang, I think if she was to win, it'd be her taking over with her striking and pulling away in the second half of the fight. Maybe it's worth reaching for some late finishes with a few dimes or something. But the prediction, no doubt, would be a decision for Weili Zhang. So Tatiana's the pick. I'll see if there's other ways to bet on it. Maybe Tatiana at plus points or something. But the prediction is Tatiana wins. And in the main event of the evening, we have Dricus du Plessis defending his middleweight championship of the world against Sean Strickland. My prediction for this fight is du Plessis wins by decision. And I do think it will be a razor-thin fight, just like the first one. And speaking of which, the odds for this fight are not razor-thin. Sean Strickland is plus 170 here. And this is just a year removed from their first fight, which I think is one of the closest fights I've ever seen. Certainly for 5-round fights. It could have gone either way. Not much has changed. I think this should be a toss-up, and Strickland is sitting here at plus 170, which is all my way of saying there's value on that. But of course, everything has been released for this fight, all the odds. I'm sure there's a few more to come, but generally everything's out here. So I wouldn't play Strickland anyway, his money line, because I do think for either guy, the primary path to victory is decision. Still, I haven't played Strickland by decision either at plus 250. It's not like that's the most inflated line anyway, where if I was going to play that, to be honest, I would just go with Strickland at plus 170 because it covers decision, but it also covers the other horse shit, the Hail Marys and whatever else. But my one bet here that I have placed, and I'm very comfortable with for sure, is Sean Strickland at plus 13.5 points. That means he pretty much can't get shut out and can't get finished. He has to, at the very least, lose a decision and win at least a round, pretty much. And Sean Strickland will do that. I mean, of course, there's a chance he gets finished, but I don't think he does. And I doubt that he would lose a decision without scoring some points. He's going to be in DDP's face. He brings that pressure, and with his pressure and his durability, I do think it's a really good bet for Sean Strickland at the plus points. As for them getting finishes, though, let me address it. They've been finished a few times each. DDP has been submitted. I do think he's the more likely guy to get the submission here, even though Sean Strickland is underrated and he's never been submitted. And again, DDP has. But I still think the first submission would go to du Plessis because he's got that physicality, and if he bear hugs your head like he did to Adesanya, your head's going to come off. And of course, much like his power, he keeps that danger deep into the fight, even though it looks like he's exhausted and he doesn't have anything left at some point before that. But every time DDP comes back, second, third wind, and he's dangerous. But I don't think a submission would come really for either guy. I don't think a knockout would come for either guy. But it's still important to talk about it. First submission, I think, would go to DDP. And for the knockout, I think it could go to either guy, really. DDP, of course, is more dangerous. He hits harder, but he's sloppy. He does leave himself open. And even though he's got deceptively good cardio and it only looks like he's gasping for air and whatever the fuck else, he still does get tired. And the one time he was knocked out was in the middle of a grueling fight, just like when he was submitted. He was submitted by Gareth McClellan, who really dominated him from top for 2.5 rounds before submitting him in the third. And in the rematch against Roberto Soldic, who he knocked out in round 3 in the fight before that, he got knocked out where he got a little tired, slowed down a little bit, and just got clipped with too many consecutive shots, was never able to recover, and finally got put away with a big one. I know DDP would have caught his third win and given the guy hell in round 3 after that, or round 4 and whatever else, but he still got a little sloppy and a little tired and ended up paying the price. It's one of his 2 losses, and it is by knockout. Strickland, of course, has been knocked out twice as well. He was knocked out by Alex Pereira and Zaleski dos Santos. a spinning wheel kick, which is as dangerous as it gets. And the only thing more dangerous than that is the left hook from Alex Pereira. So they're forgivable knockout losses. And even though he's the one who's been knocked out twice, I do trust his durability more. I think Sean Strickland is tough as all fuck. And I have it in my head. The easiest way to finish him in this matchup is to cut him wide open and win by doctor stoppage, which is bullshit. Yeah, this is one that I expect to be a 5-round war. I know they've made adjustments. I listen to interviews and try to take what I can get from there. I think Sean Strickland knows that wrestling was the deciding factor, and I've heard him talk about maybe mixing in some wrestling and not just conceding that battle to DDP. And I've also heard him talk about bringing even more pressure. Sean Strickland is always bringing that steady pressure, but when he turns it up, he can force you to make mistakes, and he can kind of, I don't know, take something from you mentally, start shit talking and start building. And I think Sean Strickland is going to be a little more aggressive in this fight. But the reason I'm predicting DDP wins, that prediction I gave you way back 10 minutes ago or whatever, it is because I still think he's got physicality on his side. He is the more well-rounded guy. And that shot that he had to get Strickland to the mat, a lot of double legs driving right through him, a few singles as well, I believe. But he was able to get him down pretty easily. He wasn't able to hold him down, but he got him down pretty easily. And I do think that's going to be a weapon of his. Again, he's not going to score the most valuable points on the ground. I don't think he'll be advancing on Sean Strickland, but I think he'll be throwing the harder shots on the feet and still have those takedowns in his back pocket to make the difference. There was a moment in their first fight where Strickland, I think, got double underhooks on him, and DDP took a few steps back, regained his balance, and took over that clinch and put him on his ass a second later. That could have been the Adesanya fight for all I know, but I know what happened. I do think it was Strickland, though. Either way, Strickland, he's definitely up against it physically, and I think even though he's an underrated grappler, he's going to be losing the positional battle to DDP for whatever points there are to be scored there. And on the feet, even though I think Strickland will always be in the points battle just with his pressure, DDP is still pretty fucking tough himself, and he definitely hits harder. And if Strickland's putting his foot on the gas, that could leave him open to getting clipped a little more easily. So yeah, this is a very compelling fight. I doubt it will be one-sided unless there's a round one knockout or something. I think this is going to be one where each guy is winning rounds. Hopefully there's not some major cut to fuck with the judges or whatever. But in the end, gun to my head and no bets in front of me, I'll go with Dricus du Plessis. He's a guy who, not that round four victory against Israel Adesanya told me anything new, but it was another example and a great championship example of him having that endless cardio when it looks like his cardio is dog shit earlier in the fight. So he's going to keep coming. I think that's his tenacity is one of his greatest assets. And even if Strickland is able to take over and get in his face and try to wear on him, even psychologically, I don't think DDP is going to break. I think at the worst, he'll lose a round and he'll come back stronger. And in the end, I've got him winning a very close battle, just like the first fight. So yeah, Dricus du Plessis by decision is the pick. The bet, the heaviest bet will certainly be Sean Strickland at plus points. And of course, I'm going to go reaching for submission and knockout props in rounds 3 and 4 and whatever, because I'm a jerk off. Like, share, subscribe, all that horse shit, and check out my other videos where the introductions are always obnoxious.